Love wasn't what destroyed me. Easiness was. If you're still here, don't wait for the end to understand. Subscribe. You won't want to miss the way the chip fell. It's 6:30, and the Boston light, that pale beige of late autumn, filters down from the high stained glass windows of the dining room, casting geometric, unwarm patterns on the dark, freshly polished hardwood floor. The scent is a mix of fine wood, breathing red wine, and that subtle note of creamed spinach and roasted garlic that I know drives him wild. Dorian Bellwether was always obsessed with comfort, with the perfection of detail, the texture of the linen tablecloth, the vintage of the Chianti, the exact angle of the polished silver cutlery my grandmother had left us. He never knew I only used them because I knew he would notice, that I could almost feel his silent, possessive pride just looking at them. I am sitting at the far end of the large mahogany table. The distance is deliberate, habitual. We were never a couple who sat side by side, even at the beginning. Always opposite, like two negotiators or two adversaries. I am wearing a simple, expensive navy dress, cut to fall effortlessly. My ash blonde hair is pulled back. Nothing gives me away. Absolutely nothing. Dorian is in a charcoal gray suit, his eternal uniform as an investment broker for the people who matter. He has that look, that relaxed predator's gaze he wears at fundraising cocktails or when closing a deal. His hands are clasped on the table, his white gold cufflinks shimmering faintly under the chandelier. He smiles at me, that smile he uses for the cameras, just warm enough not to be cold, just distant enough not to be intimate. "Stella, my dear, you look thoughtful tonight," he says. His voice is smooth, polished, with a slight English accent that never quite faded despite the years spent in Massachusetts. It's one of the things that drew me in at first, the idea of a complexity, a history behind the American self-made man. I take a small sip of my wine. It's a Sancerre, dry and cold. The coolness is pleasant against the warmth rising in my chest. I'm just thinking about the week. It's been long. Did you have your interview with the law firm? He shakes his head, a light, almost impatient gesture. "Yes, but it doesn't matter. I called them back. The offer was insulting. They are people who don't understand the importance of a certain stature in this country." There was a moment of silence, just the faint sound of water gently running from the carafe. That's when I saw the photo. It was right there, placed next to the soup tureen, on the small walnut serving buffet. A small, passport-sized photo, the kind you slip into a wallet. It wasn't meant for me. I'd found it 6 weeks ago while packing Dorian's bags for his business trip to London. It was hidden at the bottom of a Mont Blanc pen case. In the photo, Bianca Rhodes. A woman I had never met but whose name, uttered by my private investigator, had the bitter taste of a deadly secret. Bianca. The woman who had shared his flat in Knightsbridge, his professional life, and a ring that I did not possess. A ring I had found inventoried in his safety deposit box. I set my glass down, the feel of the crystal stem in my hand. Cold, fragile, dangerous if misused. "You know, Dorian, the word stature is interesting," I resumed, my voice barely a whisper. "It implies something solid, something real, not something built on sand." He laughs, a small, sneering expulsion of air. Come on, Stella, what is it? You're being poetic tonight. Are the elections still worrying you? I told you the economy won't collapse because of a few. He paused, searching for the word. It's always a delicate thing for Dorian, finding the right word for those he considers beneath him. A few tourists who don't know when to go home, he finally said, with a little self-satisfied smirk as if he had just delivered a profound truth. He cut a small slice of his fillet. I mean, those people should simply respect the law, stay in their own country. We can't have order if everyone is roaming around without papers. The clinking of his knife against the porcelain plate was the only sound in the room. I didn't move. My heart beat once. A single dull pulse, then the calm returned. It wasn't the cruelty that struck me. It was the sheer stupidity, the meaningless hypocrisy. It was the point of no return I had been waiting for. I slid my chair back, the faint scraping sound on the floor seeming incredibly loud. I stood up. He looked at me, surprised. He hasn't figured it out yet. He never figures out anything beyond his own perspective. Where are you going? He asked, his tone shifting from self-satisfaction to slight irritation. Dinner is served. I walked around the table, my steps were slow, deliberate. The fabric of my dress slid over my thighs. I smelled the wine and the wood. I headed toward the massive oak front door, the one that leads to the entrance hall. It's a door we never use, always preferring the side entrance through the garage. I'm going to get some air, I said, my voice so calm it sounded almost broken. The kitchen heat is getting to me, he sighed, annoyed. Be quick, dinner will get cold. I grasped the cold brass handle, then pressed down. The door swung open, the Boston night air rushed in, cold and laden with moisture. And right there, on the threshold of our immaculate home, stood two men. They weren't in uniform, but there was a certain stiffness to their jackets, a silent authority in the way they stood. Dark jackets, white shirts, fixed gazes. The taller one, a dark-skinned man with closely cropped hair, looked up, his gaze meeting mine. He nodded a nearly imperceptible gesture, a sign that the time had come. The plan. Behind me, Dorian had risen. His irritation had morphed into confusion. Stella, who is this? He asked, a murmur that already contained a note of apprehension. He stepped forward, placing himself behind me, his hand reaching for my shoulder to push me aside. It was the businessman's instinct, take control of the situation. He reached the door frame. He looked at the men. Dorian's gaze landed on the small lapel pin the smaller man wore. The kind of detail you only notice if you know what you're looking for. It was U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. IC. The taller of the two men, his voice deep and unemotional, spoke. Mr. Bellwether. Are you Mr. Dorian Alistair Bellwether? Dorian laughed, a small, weak, nervous laugh. I am Dorian Bellwether, yes, but there must be some mistake, and I don't see. He made a dismissive gesture with his hand, his gaze turning to me looking for help. I stood just behind him, my hand still on the cold door handle. I didn't move. I breathed. The agent continued, unfazed. We have reason to believe that your immigrant status expired on June 12th, 2011. Your E2 investor visa was not renewed following the dissolution of Bellwether Global Funds. The silence became thick, heavy. Dorian, the man who had everything, the master of finance, had nothing left to say. His complexion had changed from the red of self-satisfaction to an ashen gray. I remembered that night 14 years ago. I was then a young lawyer, a little too impressed by his promises, by the way he talked about building an empire. He had told me he'd sorted out his visa issue, that he had made an administrative error. He had looked at me with those intense, lying blue eyes, and I had acquiesced. I had believed his love for me was enough to offset his flaws. I was wrong. I was a cover. Me, his American wife, was his insurance. That's when I saw the fear. Pure, primitive, unfiltered. It was no longer the predator, but the trapped animal. Stella. The sound of my name was different. Not the husband's affectionate call, but the desperate cry of a castaway. You have to tell them we're married. I'm the husband of a citizen. I have lawyers. This is a mistake. I stepped forward, slowly, and stood beside him. I looked at the agents. Then I looked at Dorian. His eyes pleaded, but in the corner of them I still saw the shadow of the contempt he reserved for those he considered illegals. You are right, Dorian, I said, my voice calm, but each word was a hammer blow on ice. You are my husband. And for 14 years I believed in stature, in legality, in loyalty. I paused, a fleeting smile crossing my face. I thought back to Bianca Rhodes, to the lie about the embezzled money, to the ease with which he had erased people, funds, laws. You wanted these people to respect the law, Dorian, I continued. You wanted them to go home when their papers were no longer valid. It turns out the law is universal. I held out my hand. Between my thumb and forefinger, I held the small key. The key I had, subtly removed from his trouser pocket last night, while he slept. Heavily sedated by the sleeping pills, I had served him with his tea. The key to his safe deposit box, the same safe deposit box where the proof lay, the dissolution documents, the incriminating emails, and most importantly, the receipt for the engagement ring for Bianca. That key, Dorian, is for your office safe, I whispered, almost affectionately. I sent everything, you know, the fund dissolution documents, the proof that you lied to immigration years ago to secure a green card that never materialized. ICE has all the information. They know you've been here illegally for 14 years. I dropped the key. It fell onto the polished floor with a faint metallic clink. A ridiculous final sound. Dorian gasped. It was a horrible sound, a mix of surprise, anger, and realization. He tried to rush towards me, but the agent took a step forward, a solid, unwavering presence. Mrs. Bellwether, we thank you for your cooperation, the lead agent said, emotionlessly. I stepped back, my back against the door. I looked at my husband for the last time. He was collapsing. Not in tears, but in that cold realization that his house of cards had fallen. And it was I, the silent architect, who had pulled the first card. The hand that had rested on my shoulder to push me aside was now outstretched, trembling toward me. You did this?" he asked. His voice was hoarse. "After everything, 14 years. Why?" I remembered the feeling of my wedding band, too heavy and too perfect on my finger. I remembered Bianca's photo. I remembered every moment he had made me feel small, simple, just a wife next to a great man. "You taught me the importance of the law, Dorian," I replied, the ice in my voice colder than the night air. "And I believe you disrespected that law. Respecting order is vital. Go home, Dorian." The agents acted quickly. There was a movement of a jacket, a sound of restraint, and he was being led outside into the night's shadow, away from the chandelier and the polished floor. He only had time to give me one look, a look of total, absolute hatred, before being pushed into the back of a black SUV. I closed the door gently. The click of the lock echoed in the silence. I walked back to the table. Dinner was there. The filet was lukewarm. The wine was still breathing. Dorian's absence was deafening, but I wasn't alone. I was with the truth. A cold, elegant, and inevitable truth. It was justice in its purest form, dressed in a cocktail dress and smelling of creamed spinach. The night wind struck the dining room window. The table was set for two. I picked up my knife, cut a small slice of filet, and brought it to my mouth. It was the first time in 14 years I had eaten without worrying about his opinion. If this story still echoes in you, then you are exactly the kind of soul who understands. Subscribe before the next truth finds you first.